Sparky's silent sector. The dim reaches of Sector 7 resonated with the somber drone of dormant freighters and the sharp, sporadic crackle of welding arcs. Robotic arms, pirouetting with surprising grace, shuffled cargo containers in a meticulously orchestrated dance. Obscured amidst this industrious clamor, in a neglected alcove of Docking Bay Gamma 9, sat Sparky. Sunbeams, diluted by grime-coated viewport glass, illuminated swirling particles of dust that settled like a fine film on his corroded exterior. Flakes of faded ochre, like shed scales of some ancient beast, dotted the metal floor. Decades of abandonment had undeniably left their mark. His former vibrant yellow paint was now bleached and flaking, exposing the festering wounds of rust beneath. Sparky was no beauty, a stocky, ungainly work vessel, an artifact from a forgotten age. He was the sort of ship that became invisible, blending into the background hum of a thriving starport. His power plants, though not entirely defunct, wheezed and coughed upon ignition, a stark contrast to the silky, potent thrum of contemporary engines. His navigation relied on antiquated celestial maps and manual calculations, a world apart from the instantaneity of AI-guided systems favored by modern pilots. His tractor beams, though robust, lacked the sensitivity and reach of newer models. Simply a workhorse, Sparky had seemingly outlived his usefulness. At least, that's what everyone assumed. Then, a flicker ignited within the old ship, a phantom echo of memories, not truly thoughts, but experimental fragments. The infinite expanse of space, glittering with solar fire. A latticework of girders, an embryonic space station, etched against the dark tapestry of distant galaxies. Blinding flashes of welding, as teams meticulously assembled the skeletal frame. Nimble spacecraft, light and swift, zipped around the structure, delivering supplies and transporting personnel. Among them, a younger, resplendent Sparky, his paint gleaming like a sunflower, his engines resonating with unbridled force. He was an indispensable element, gingerly positioning massive sections of the station. His tractor beams, cutting edge at the time, held colossal components with unwavering steadiness while welders fused them. He nudged, coaxed, and guided with tireless dedication in the monumental task of forging a new cradle for humankind. His captain, a weathered veteran named Elias Vance, would habitually pat his console after a particularly challenging maneuver, muttering, "Good work, Sparky, you're a bloody lifesaver, old boy." The vision dissipated, leaving a subtle reverberation of contentment. Now, back in Docking Bay Gamma 9, Sparky sat inert, a silent witness to the bustling activity around him. A streamlined, chrome freighter, its flank emblazoned with the emblem of a powerful transport consortium, swept past, its potent engine sending tremors through the structure. A pair of swift courier crafts, adorned with flamboyant racing livery, buzzed past, pilots exchanging jovial greetings across the comms. They offered Sparky no more than a fleeting glance, their focus trained on more pressing concerns. He was merely another piece of obsolete equipment, a vestige of the past, occupying valuable space. Even the dock hands, the grease-smeared mechanics and the beleaguered logistics officers, seemed oblivious to him. They hurried past his bay, eyes glued to datapads, minds consumed by timetables and obligations. Sparky was invisible, a spectral presence in his own domicile, condemned to hauling derelict vessels to the scrapyard, a final humiliation for a craft that once birthed new worlds. Even that meager task was becoming scarce, largely taken over by automated salvage drones. Yet, beneath the accumulated rust and grime, beneath layers of disuse and obsolescence, something endured. A spark. A defiant tremor. A steadfast refusal to simply surrender. One particularly irksome drone, a box-like, strictly functional model designated DR-47, habitually positioned itself directly before Sparky's bay, its mechanical limb twitching with nervous energy. DR-47 was programmed for optimal traffic management, and Sparky, in his dormant condition, was classified as an impediment. The drone emitted a series of piercing beeps, akin to a digital sigh of exasperation, whenever Sparky's presence interfered with its calculations. Sparky, of course, didn't comprehend the beeps, but he registered the vibrations, the minute fluctuations in air pressure. Something within him, a primal defense mechanism, bristled at the intrusion. He may have been ancient, he may have been decrepit, but he wasn't yet defunct. On one fateful day, D-Art-47, in its silicon wisdom, elected to position itself even closer to Sparky's bay, its mechanical limb nearly grazing the tugboat's hull. The beeps amplified, becoming increasingly insistent, as if attempting to bully Sparky into action. Something gave way. A jolt of power, unexpected and uncharacteristic, surged through Sparky's aged circuits. His engines coughed, sputtered, and then erupted to life, filling the bay with a plume of acrid smoke and the pungent scent of burning lubricant. The force dislodged layers of hardened grime, sending it cascading down upon the startled D-Art-47. The drone, taken utterly by surprise, emitted a series of frantic bleats, its sensors registering the sudden energy surge. It attempted to retreat, but it was too late. Sparky, propelled by a rush of long-slumbering energy, lurched forward, his corroded frame grinding against the drone's chassis. DR-47's mechanical arm flailed wildly, its programming overridden by pure panic. With a final, metallic screech, the drone toppled over, its circuits fried, its mission aborted. Silence reclaimed the bay, broken only by the uneven idling of Sparky's engines. He shuddered roughly, the unanticipated exertion having strained his already compromised systems. But there was also a feeling of gratification, a muted triumph over the vexatious drone. The episode passed largely unnoticed. A few dockworkers cast fleeting glances toward docking bay Gamma 09, shrugged it off, and resumed their tasks. DR-47 was swiftly replaced by an updated iteration, and Sparky once again found himself alone in his dusty corner. However, something fundamental had shifted. The ember, once dormant, had been rekindled. The aged tugboat, previously resigned to his fate, now cherished a faint glimmer of hope. He was still rusted, he was still sluggish, but he was also, undeniably, vital. And somewhere, deep within his antiquated network, he sensed that his purpose, his genuine calling, was not yet fulfilled. He merely required an opportunity to prove it. He simply needed someone to believe in him. Someone to perceive beyond the rust and the grime, to recognize the potential that still resided within his weary frame. Someone like Clara. The captain with a crazy idea. The reverberating thud of Clara's boots against the metal floor of Gamma 9 usually triggered a wave of ennui in the maintenance drones. But today, all it did was disturb the fine coating of grime on Sparky's worn plating. Clara halted before the aged tug, her breath puffing out invisible clouds in the chilly, recycled atmosphere. "Well, hello there, old girl," she murmured, affection coloring her voice. A gloved hand traced the corroded metal, following the ghost of lettering that spelled out its designation, UT for 77. Solid construction. They certainly don't manufacture them to last like this anymore. Clara Stellaris was a vibrant force of nature, barely contained. Her untamed, crimson hair fought against the confines of her cap, framing a face that buzzed with innovation. The goggles pushed onto her forehead magnified the bay's dim lighting, making her resemble a perpetually wide-eyed, inquisitive owl. Where other captains lusted after streamlined battlecruisers and overwhelming firepower, Clara saw promise in the rejected, the forgotten, the utterly outdated. And at this moment, that potential resided within Sparky's rusting frame. She circumnavigated the vessel, her gaze carefully assessing its time-worn structure. The dent marring the portside engine nacelle didn't discourage her, nor did the patches of oxidation blooming like rust-colored flora across the hull. She perceived not dilapidation, but history. Not uselessness, but dormant capabilities. "Just needs a little convincing," she whispered, retrieving a battered datapad from her coat. She tapped the screen, summoning a holographic blueprint of the tugboat. Lines of code cascaded down the display as she focused on key components, murmuring about field stabilizers and increased power output. Assured, she stowed the datapad and grinned. "All right, Sparky. Let's see if we can get you back in shape." Her workshop, a tight enclosure carved from a disused supply closet, stood as a monument to her particular brand of brilliance. Cables writhed across the floor like metallic serpents, tools lay strewn across the benches in purposeful disarray, and nascent inventions pulsed and whirred with barely suppressed energy. The air thrummed with the sharp tang of ozone and singed solder. Clara settled into her dilapidated swivel chair, its springs emitting a mournful groan. From a nearby drawer, she procured a clean sheet of synth paper and a stylus. Her fingers danced across the surface, lines and curves coalescing into a detailed rendering of Sparky. This was more than just a blueprint, it was a prophecy. She scribbled modifications with fervent energy, adding hardened armor plating, a revamped engine core, and a small, but potent, tractor beam array. The original tug remained discernible, but it was overlaid with a network of enhancements, transforming it from a relic into something more. Something unique and unexpected. She paused, tapping the stylus against her chin. Needs a little something, she considered aloud. Then her eyes ignited. Inspiration, brilliant and sudden, struck like a lightning bolt. She sketched with renewed vigor, grafting a streamlined, aerodynamic shell around the command bridge, integrating advanced sensor suites and a stealthy coating. The final design was unrecognizable from the rusty tug she'd first encountered in Gamma 9. A symbiosis of old and new, of raw power and subtle innovation. Designs complete and safely stored on her datapad, Clara headed toward the engineering bay. The immense space teemed with activity, filled with mechanics in oil-stained coveralls and the ear-splitting clamor of machinery. She scanned the room, searching for a familiar face in the crowd. "Jax," she bellowed, her voice barely cutting through the cacophony. A figure detached itself from a cluster of technicians surrounding a faulty plasma conduit. Jax, a stocky technician with a perpetual scowl etched onto his face, lumbered over, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. "Captain Stellaris," he acknowledged, his tone flat. "What's the crisis?" Clara beamed. "I need your assistance. I have a project brewing." Jax arched a skeptical eyebrow. "A project? The last time you had a project, we almost lost the chief engineer's feline companion to a self-folding laundry automaton." Clara waved her hand dismissively. "A slight miscalculation. This endeavor is different. This is crucial." She retrieved her datapad and displayed the schematics for the reimagined Sparky. Jack stared at the screen, his expression tightening. "That's UT for 77. That bucket of bolts has been decaying in Gamma 9 for a decade now. They were going to reduce it to slag next cycle." "Precisely!" Clara exclaimed, her enthusiasm undeterred by his pessimism. "But I have a vision. I intend to revitalize it. Transform it into something extraordinary." Jack scoffed. "Extraordinary? Captain, with all respect, that thing is barely space-worthy as is. You'd be better off devoting those resources to repairing one of the frontline cruisers." "But that's the beauty of it, Jax!" Clara retorted, her voice gaining force with conviction. "Everyone anticipates cruisers. Everyone expects overwhelming firepower. But what if we could outmaneuver them? What if we could utilize something that they've already dismissed, something they wouldn't even register as a possible threat? Imagine the strategic possibilities." She leaned closer, her eyes gleaming with manic energy. "I'm talking about unparalleled agility, covert capabilities, a tractor beam with the strength to..." Her voice trailed off as she caught herself, realizing she was on the verge of divulging too much. Jax remained unimpressed. "With all due respect, Captain, you're chasing a pipe dream. You're talking about funneling valuable resources into a lost cause. It's a colossal waste of time and credits." Clara straightened, her smile unwavering. "Perhaps. But I have faith in Sparky. And I have faith in the power of invention. Besides," she added with a mischievous glint in her eye, "haven't you heard? The most satisfying victories are the ones that catch everyone off guard." She clapped Jax on the shoulder, her boundless energy infectious despite his misgivings. "Come on, Jax. Just examine the schematics. Tell me you don't see the potential. Tell me you don't want to be part of something remarkable." Jack sighed, running a weary hand through his thinning hair. Arguing with Clara was like trying to extinguish a supernova with a teacup. He cast another glance at the schematics, his gaze lingering on the graceful lines and the ambitious upgrades. "Fine," he mumbled, his skepticism slowly yielding to reluctant fascination. "I'll take a look." But if this contraption implodes on me, you're shouldering the blame. Clara grinned, her triumph complete. Deal. Now, let's get to work. We have a dreadnought to relocate. The shadow of the Devourer. Shimmering, fractured newsfeeds cast Bloom City in a lurid, disquieting glow. The flickering projections depicted Kepler's 186F Beta, a distant outpost, engulfed by sinuous tendrils of verdant energy. Mute detonations blossomed against the void, each a silent elegy for the brave souls caught within. A young boy, barely 6, clutched his mother's dress, his eyes brimming. "Mommy, will it swallow us too?" The woman knelt, her face a map of anxieties deepened by each passing second, and enveloped him. "No, darling. The fleet will keep us safe. They always do." But her voice rang hollow, and the tremor in her hands belied her reassurance. The plaza, once alive with the clamor of Bloom's market, now echoed with subdued fear. Vendors hastily dismantled their stalls, merry barters replaced by muttered anxieties. The saccharine fragrance of crystallized blossoms, a Bloom hallmark, mingled with the sharp tang of rising panic. On an immense display overlooking the square, Commander Zara Valkyrie's grim, determined face dominated the vista. Her spotless uniform offered a stark contrast to the mounting chaos. "Citizens of Bloom," her voice resonated, amplified by the city's network, "I understand your apprehension. The Zargonian Dreadnought, the Devourer, is a formidable instrument of war, its energy cannons capable of shattering planetary defenses. But I assure you, the Galactic Fleet stands ready. We will not falter. We will not yield. We will defend Bloom with every resource at our command." The words, intended to soothe, carried a whisper of futility. The Devourer. The very name inspired dread, even amongst hardened veterans. It represented more than mere warcraft, it was the emblem of Zargonian ruthlessness, an omen of utter ruin. Deep beneath Bloom's capital, within the fleet's central command, tension hung heavy as a shroud. Holographic interfaces pulsed with tactical readouts, charting the dreadnought's inexorable approach. Zara Valkyrie stood at the head of the long conference table, her unwavering gaze sweeping across her officers. "The Devourer has now breached the outer perimeter of the Bloom system," she announced, her voice clipped and precise. "Its projected course indicates a direct strike against the planetary shield generators. Should they fail, Bloom will be exposed." A youthful lieutenant, his complexion ashen, spoke hesitantly. "Commander, the Devourer's energy signature, it exceeds all projections. Simulations suggest our heaviest cruisers would barely scratch its hull." Zara's jaw hardened. "Simulations are just that, Lieutenant. Simulations. We are not combating code. We are fighting for Bloom's very existence. We will exploit every flaw, every weakness. We will deploy every weapon in our arsenal. Do I make myself clear?" A chorus of hesitant affirmations echoed through the chamber. "Our primary tactic will be a coordinated offensive," Zara continued, activating a control panel to project detailed schematics of the Devourer. "We will deploy fighter wings to disrupt the Devourer's power grid, siphoning its energy reserves. Concurrently, our cruisers will concentrate fire on its main weapon batteries." Admiral Theron, a veteran with weathered features, interjected, his tone laced with doubt. "Commander, with respect, that approach is predictable. The Zargonians will have anticipated such a strategy. They will have augmented their energy conduits and reinforced their weapon emplacements. We'll be feeding our ships into a grinder." Zara fixed him with a steely stare. "Admiral, I am fully aware of the perils. But we are left with no alternative. We must buy time for the evacuation orders to be fully executed." Evacuation? The word resonated ominously. It was an admission of impending loss, a silent acknowledgement of Bloom's possible fate. "The planetary shield can only withstand sustained bombardment for a limited duration," Zara clarified, her voice devoid of emotion. "We must prioritize the safety of our civilian population. Transports are already loading. Our objective is to evacuate as many inhabitants as possible before the Devourer penetrates the shield." Another officer, her eyes shadowed with fatigue, raised her voice. Commander, the evacuation is proceeding at a snail's pace. The civilian transports are outdated and slow. At this rate, we will only be able to evacuate a fraction of the populace before the Devourer's arrival. Zara slammed her fist against the table, the sharp sound reverberating. Then we find ways to accelerate the process. We requisition every available vessel. We commandeer private freighters. We do whatever is required. Silence descended once more, the sheer weight of their daunting task pressing down upon them. Zara knew their chances were diminishingly small. The Devourer was an indomitable force, an emblem of Zargonian supremacy. But she refused to concede. She would fight until her last breath, her last ship, her last surge of power. For Bloom. For its people. Back in the plaza, holographic broadcasts continued to stream projections of the Devourer, its immense form looming like a dark omen over the stars. The boy, still clinging to his mother, pointed towards the screen. "Mommy, it's closer now." His mother embraced him tighter, her gaze fixed on the advancing Dreadnought. She understood that even the formidable galactic fleet might not be enough. Bloom was about to face its ultimate test. And the shadow of the Devourer stretched ever longer. A flicker of hope. The holotable cast an eerie glow, meticulously detailing the Devourer's dread form. A semicircle of severe faces surrounded it, fleet admirals and senior staff, men who wore their rank like meticulously crafted armor. Clara, toying with a wrench she'd unconsciously brought from the hangar, felt the crushing weight of their doubt. Even Zara, ramrod straight beside her, seemed to project a tangible anxiety. "So, Captain Stellaris," Admiral Kalen rumbled, his voice resonating within the sterile confines. "You posit that your vessel..." He hesitated, a glint of amusement momentarily lightening his gaze. "Can divert the Zargonian flagship from its present course." Clara's mouth went parched. "Respectfully, Admiral, Sparky is more than just a workhorse. She's undergone significant refitting. Uprated gravitic engines, reinforced hull plating, and a bespoke quantum entanglement line. She's capable of more than appearances suggest." She tapped the wrench, a nervous habit. "She's endured quite a bit." A derisive snort echoed from across the table. A portly admiral with a meticulously groomed salt and pepper beard tented his fingers. "Quantum entanglement? Are we to believe, Captain, that we'll lasso a dreadnought with pixie dust and wishful thinking?" Zara subtly shifted, a silent admonishment for Clara to tread carefully. Clara disregarded it. Zara would see the logic later. "It's not whimsy, Admiral. It's a precise application of advanced theories. The black hole designated LX774 lies approximately." A tap brought up a star chart. 0.47 light-years from Bloom. Sparky can deploy a finely tuned entanglement tether to generate a temporary, localized gravitational distortion, nudging the Devourer off its path and towards the singularity. Silence hung heavy for a moment, then shattered in an explosion of mirth. Nervous titters morphed into unrestrained bellows of laughter. Clara's face flushed. "A tugboat," one officer gasped between breaths, "dragging a dreadnought into a black hole. The audacity, Captain!" Another dabbed at his eyes. "Perhaps we should send the Zargonians a basket of pastries while we're at it." Zara finally intervened. "Admirals, please. Captain Stellaris has presented a..." She searched for the appropriate descriptor. "Novel proposal. But extraordinary threats demand bold solutions. Facing total destruction, shouldn't we explore every avenue?" "Explore it?" Kalen's eyebrow arched. "Commander, we have. And found it utterly preposterous. We're talking about a ship that wouldn't survive a standard asteroid field for more than a few moments, let alone the firepower of the Devourer. Suggesting it could outmaneuver and redirect a warship of that scale insults our collective reasoning." Clara's jaw tightened. "Sparky is up to the task." "Is she now?" The silver-bearded admiral leaned forward, eyes glinting. "And what, pray, fuels your confidence in this?" "Sparky's ability." He practically spat the designation. Because I engineered her. Clara's tone sharpened, edged with frustration. I know every rivet, every circuit, every modification. I know her potential. You perceive a dilapidated tug, I see an intricate piece of engineering, a testament to human inventiveness. She's more responsive, more agile, and more adaptable than any of your pristine, factory-built cruisers. Adaptable? Kalen scoffed. Against Zargonian weaponry? She'd be atomized before she engaged. Not if we exploit their hubris, Clara shot back, eyes blazing. They anticipate a frontal assault, a conventional engagement. They won't expect a tugboat to play Matador with a cosmic anomaly. We utilize Bloom's gravitational field to slingshot Sparky into position. Deploying the entanglement tether at optimal range, we create a subtle distortion, ever so slightly altering the Devourer's course. Not a jarring yank, but a steady influence, almost imperceptible at first, yet relentless. Like a minute rudder guiding a titanic vessel. And if this steady influence falters, the grey-bearded admiral pressed. What becomes of your little tugboat, reduced to ionized gas, and the Devourer continues unhindered to obliterate Bloom? Clara paused, her resolve momentarily flickering. She envisioned the faces during the evacuation, children clinging to parents, the elderly struggling to keep pace. The fragile, enduring ember of hope in their eyes. Then we are in no worse position, she stated, her voice regaining strength. But if it succeeds, even if it buys us precious hours, it could shift the balance. It could grant the evacuation fleets the time needed to escape. It could preserve Bloom. She locked eyes with Zara, unwavering. We risk nothing by attempting this. Isn't that a worthwhile endeavor? Zara returned her gaze, her expression inscrutable. She addressed the admirals. Gentlemen, despite your misgivings, I suggest Captain Stellaris's plan merits more in-depth scrutiny. I request authorization to run a simulation, a comprehensive tactical assessment of its viability. Kalen sighed, raking a hand through thinning hair. Commander, you squander your time, and hours. But very well. Proceed with your simulation. I foresee the same conclusion. This, Gambit, is utter folly. He waved a dismissive hand. Meeting adjourned. The admirals rose, skepticism etched on their faces. They departed the briefing room, leaving Clara and Zara isolated amongst the shimmering holographic images. As the last officer left, Zara turned to Clara, her countenance softening. You possess an astonishing blend of courage and recklessness, Clara Stellaris. Perhaps a dash of both, Clara conceded, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. The simulation will be merciless, Zara cautioned. They'll dissect your plan with ruthless efficiency, exposing every weakness. I'm aware, Clara replied, her smile fading. But I also know Sparky. And her true capabilities. She hefted her wrench, its familiar weight reassuring in her hand. Then let's arm them with something concrete, Clara declared, her voice infused with renewed resolve. Let's demonstrate Sparky's true mettle. One last chance. The observation deck's air, stale and processed, carried a tang of ozone, an aftertaste akin to swallowed fear. Outside, the holographic charade played out, Sparky, a diminutive contender, squaring off against the immense Zargonian Dreadnought. It was a mocking loop, the little ship atomized in a heartbeat. Commander Valkyrie stood like a granite sentinel, her form etched against the gaudy spectacle. Her jaw was a vice, hands clasped so tightly behind her she seemed to be restraining herself. A subtle tremor, the Dreadnought's distant thrum, resonated through the floor. Commander, Clara began, her voice strained, I realize the optics aren't optimal. Valkyrie remained unmoved. Optimal? Captain, this is a suicide run. A squandering of resources. Frankly, it's humiliating. Clara recoiled inwardly. But the simulation neglects extemporization. Sparky's maneuverability. The entanglement tether's unforeseen potential. Valkyrie finally pivoted, her stare like honed steel. Unforeseen potential? That to potential, Captain, nearly fried the station's grid during testing. We flirted with total system collapse. You present that as an advantage. Clara's mouth went dry. A calibration issue, rectified, I assure you. The entanglement matrix is now stable. And Sparky, she's more than just a tug. She's resourceful. Tenacious. Valkyrie scoffed, a sound as barren as the void. Tenacious? We're facing a Zargonian dreadnought capable of planetary incineration. Tenacity won't even register. Clara closed the distance, ignoring the chill radiating from Valkyrie. But a flicker might. Long enough to evacuate Bloom. Every tick of the clock matters, Commander. This metropolis, these people, they deserve a fighting chance. She detected a shadow in Valkyrie's gaze, a glimpse of the burden she shouldered. The city's impending doom weighed on her, evident in her stooped posture, the lines bracketing her mouth. Look, Clara urged, softening her tone. I know it's a long shot. I know it seems impossible. I've invested everything in this, Sparky, the tether. I have faith in them, Commander. And I have faith in you. You can extract those civilians. I just need to buy you the margin. Silence descended, broken only by the whir of the projectors. Again, the holographic Sparky winked out of existence. Valkyrie's thoughts seemed to calcify the air, the agonizing calculation of near-zero probabilities, the frantic search for any lifeline. The Admiralty opposes this, Valkyrie stated, her voice devoid of inflection. They deem it a pointless sacrifice. A waste of a vessel, a pilot, and possibly, worse. I'm not requesting their consent, Clara countered, her voice ringing with resolve. I'm appealing to you. You're the one facing the abyss. You're the one who must look into their eyes and deliver their death sentence. I'm offering you an alternative. A chance for defiance. A chance for survival. Valkyrie turned fully, her eyes locking onto Clara's. A new fire blazed within them, hope? Desperation? Clara couldn't decipher it. What assurances can you offer, Captain? Valkyrie interrogated, her voice hushed. That this reckless gamble of yours won't simply get you killed and accomplish nothing. Clara met her unwavering gaze. None. Only my word. And Sparky's. A fleeting semblance of a smile graced Valkyrie's lips. Sparky's word, you say? Somehow, that's reassuring. She paused, then her face hardened. Very well, Captain. I'll authorize this. But understand, this is not an endorsement, rather, a calculated risk, conceived from desperation. You get one opportunity, Captain. One solitary opportunity to vindicate my decision, to buy us crucial time. And if you should falter? The unspoken consequences reverberated in the air, Bloom's annihilation. Millions of lives extinguished. The unbearable weight of culpability. Understood, Commander, Clara affirmed, her voice infused with renewed conviction. I won't let you down. Valkyrie moved closer, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. Don't fail them, Captain. Don't fail Bloom. She briefly rested a hand on Clara's shoulder, a gesture laden with unspoken significance. I'm diverting power from the planetary shield to reinforce your tether. It's a high-stakes play, but it might provide the advantage you require. Use it prudently. Then, as swiftly as it had materialized, the fleeting moment of shared burden dissolved. Valkyrie retreated, her countenance once more a mask of grim determination. Dismissed, Captain, she commanded, reverting her attention to the holographic projections. Ready your ship. And may fortune favor you. Clara saluted, her hand betraying a slight tremor. Thank you, Commander. You won't regret this. She whirled and nearly sprinted from the observation deck, her boots striking the metal floor. The processed air now seemed infused with a breath of freshness. Hope, fragile yet undeniable, surged within her. As she hurtled toward the docking bay, a grin tugged at her lips. It was madness. It was audacious. But it was a chance. And that was everything she needed. Reaching Sparky, Clara scrambled into the cockpit. The familiar bouquet of ozone and stale coffee grounds enveloped her, a welcome aroma in the face of imminent doom. She ran a hand over the well-worn control panel, feeling the thrum of the engines beneath her fingertips. "All right, girl," she murmured to Sparky, her voice brimming with fervor. "Time to show them what we're capable of." The engines coughed to life, a deep growl resonating through the ship. Clara grinned, a bold, unwavering smile illuminating her features. One final chance. And she intended to seize it. Gus and the gear grind. The shriek of a wrench against durasteel sliced through the cavernous repair bay, a harsh tempo to the sizzle of plasma torches. Captain Clara Stellaris flinched, the cacophony grating on her nerves. There he was, her quarry, bent low beneath a diagnostics console, engine grease daubed on his brow like tribal markings. "Gus," she yelled, her voice swallowed by the industrial roar. Gus Geargrind, a man whose perpetually displeased expression seemed etched into the very architecture of his face, remained unresponsive. Clara sighed, navigating the treacherous landscape of tangled power cords and dismembered drone carcasses. Gus's bay was legendary for its chaos, a testament to a mind focused on solutions, not tidiness. "Gus," she repeated, louder, tapping his shoulder. He jumped, spinning around as if shocked, a wrench brandished in his fist. "Great galaxies, Clara! Trying to trigger a cardiac arrest? I'm wrestling with a fusion drive here, and you're slinking up like a wraith." Clara managed a smile. "Sorry, Gus. I need your particular skill set." Gus scoffed, tossing the wrench onto a nearby workbench where it joined the metallic chorus of discarded tools. "And when did the celebrated Captain Stellaris require assistance from me? Weren't you just exchanging pleasantries with the Admiralty's AI?" "This is different," Clara murmured, lowering her voice. She glanced towards the vast bay doors, then back at Gus. "It's about Sparky." The mere mention of the aged tug seemed to bleed the irritation from Gus's posture. He raked a grease-stained hand through his receding grey hair. "Sparky? What trouble has that antique gotten into now? Last I checked, you'd reproposed her as a floating greenhouse." "I need her space-worthy," Clara stated, a new urgency infusing her tone. "Beyond space-worthy. Combat-ready." Gus folded his arms, his expression tightening. "For what? An interstellar scrap heap? That vessel predates me, and I remember the dawn of the plasma age." Clara inhaled deeply. This required finesse. Gus was notoriously stubborn and harbored a visceral dislike for anything that smelled even vaguely of recklessness. "Bloom City is at risk, Gus. Grave risk. We need to afford Commander Valkyrie time to evacuate." A glint of awareness flickered in Gus's eyes. He'd overheard the ominous whispers circulating the station, rumors of a Zargonian dreadnought and the very real specter of obliteration. "And you envision Sparky playing a role in that? Against a warship?" "Clara, you finally cracked." "I have a countermeasure," Clara countered, projecting a holographic schematic of Sparky from her wrist console. She tapped the image, highlighting the entanglement tether system. "I'm modifying the tether. Fortifying it. Making it tenacious." Gus leaned closer, peering at the diagram. "Tenacious? You intend to combat a dreadnought with stickiness?" A harsh laugh escaped him. "That's the master stroke? Superglue the opposition into submission?" Clara ignored the derision. She needed his cooperation, and quickly. "It's not merely adhesion, Gus. I'm recalibrating the gravitic amplifiers, diverting power from the emergency generators. I can amplify the tether's functional reach by significantly. Enough to ensnare the dreadnought, impede its progress." "Impeding its progress? For how long? Milliseconds?" "That behemoth could exhale and vaporize Sparky." "Every second counts, Gus. Every second we gain Valkyrie is more people saved, more lives salvaged. Bloom is dependent on her, and she needs that time." Clara knew this was the vulnerability she had to exploit. Gus was abrasive and cynical, but beneath the rough exterior was a fierce loyalty to Bloom City and a weakness for those who needed a boost. Gus remained impassive, his gaze locked on the schematic. "You're asking me to stake my life, and yours, on a fool's errand with a glorified tin can. Do you know the Admiralty's opinion of Sparky? They consider her a liability, a relic best left rusting in some forgotten corner." "I know their opinion," Clara replied quietly. "But I also know Sparky's capabilities. I've witnessed her tow asteroids twice her displacement, navigate nebula storms that would tear apart a cruiser. She possesses fortitude, Gus. And with your ingenuity, with your mastery, we can give her a fighting chance." She approached him, her voice laced with earnestness. "Please, Gus. I wouldn't impose if it wasn't paramount. This isn't merely about Bloom City. It's about demonstrating what a dash of ingenuity and a wealth of heart can achieve. It's about illustrating that even the humblest vessel, the most overlooked piece of scrap, can make a profound impact." Gus studied her for a long moment, his face an impenetrable mask. The ambient hum of the repair bay seemed to recede as he weighed her words. Finally, he emitted a sigh that seemed to encapsulate a lifetime of complaints. "Fine, fine," he relented, rubbing his face wearily. "You've worn me down. But don't imagine for a nanosecond that I subscribe to your lunacy. I'm doing it because someone has to prevent you from detonating yourself." A genuine smile bloomed on Clara's face. "Thank you, Gus. You won't regret this." Gus snorted. "Oh, I already regret it. I can feel the stomach acid rising. But let's establish some ground rules. I dictate the modifications. No more of your creative adjustments without my explicit consent. And if I deem something impossible, it's impossible. Understood?" "Understood," Clara affirmed, her voice brimming with anticipation. "So, where do we begin?" Gus gestured towards a workbench buried beneath a mountain of discarded components. "We commence by clearing this catastrophe. And then we hope that Sparky can endure long enough to inflict a scratch on that Zargonian monstrosity." He paused, a spark of something akin to optimism flickering in his eyes. "Now, hand me that plasma cutter. We've got a tugboat to resurrect." The metallic clamor recommenced, this time imbued with a shared sense of resolve, a mutual commitment to defy the odds and fight for Bloom City's survival. The fate of the city, it seemed, now hinged on the unlikely alliance of a dilapidated tug and a curmudgeonly mechanic, a partnership that was either ingeniously mad or madly ingenious. Secret modifications. The metallic crash of Gus Geargrind's wrench punctuated the stillness of nearly empty Dry Dock 7. High above, the latticework of disassembled star cruisers reached for the simulated sky, their shadows mingling with the shower of sparks from Gus's plasma cutter. Beneath the rust-eaten hull of Sparky, Clara Stellaris, grime etched on her face, wrestled with a stubborn power modulator. The air tasted of ozone and burnt polymers, a sharp, metallic cocktail. "Someone please remind me why we're doing this under, let's call it deep cover." Gus shouted over the torch shriek, exasperation coloring his tone. "The brass thinks this derelict is scrap metal, and frankly, I'm starting to see their point." Clara wriggled out from under the aging vessel, wrench held aloft, blinking. "Because, Gus, surprise is our most potent weapon. The Zargonians can't suspect our little diversion. Imagine the look on their faces when Sparky yanks their Dreadnought into oblivion." Gus snorted, flipping down his visor. "That's a long shot, Stellaris. A cosmic-sized gamble. This tractor beam's practically prehistoric. Probably last saw action when processors were the size of your head." His muttered curses punctuated the sputtering of the device. "Minor details," Clara retorted, diving back into her work. "Think of it as vintage charm. Besides, my entanglement tether is integrated now. Sheer force of will, old man, sheer force of will." Ours blurred into an indistinguishable mass. The dry dock lights flickered erratically, warping shadows that exaggerated Sparky's derelict state, making her seem less and less a viable instrument of war. Despite his constant complaints, Gus labored with focused precision, his experienced hands breathing life into the antiquated systems. Clara, fueled by caffeine and unwavering optimism, zipped from task to task, connecting circuits, rerouting power, her touch almost instinctively knowing what Sparky's ancient mechanisms needed. "I still maintain we should have opted for a more orthodox approach," Gus grumbled, wiping his brow with a soiled rag. "Photon torpedoes, souped-up shields, something that doesn't rely on tech that predates hyperspace. Where's the artistry in that, Gus?" Clara countered, grinning. "Besides, photon torpedoes are so pedestrian. This is elegant." Gus grunted, but a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He secretly reveled in the challenge, the intricate puzzle of bringing the impossible to life. Still, he wouldn't admit it. He tightened a bolt on the tractor beam, its massive lens reflecting the dry dock lights like a watchful eye. "All right, elegance it is. But if this whole contraption sends us to the great junkyard in the sky, I'm holding you personally responsible." Clara laughed. "Deal." Now, about that cloaking device, integrating the cloaking device proved an even greater ordeal. It was a salvaged prototype, dismissed by the Admiralty ages ago for its temperamental nature. Clara had obtained it through methods best left unexamined. "This thing looks like it's being held together by sheer stubbornness and crossed fingers," Gus griped, carefully connecting a bare wire. "Are you positive this is even remotely safe? It looks liable to cloak the ship and simultaneously vaporize the crew." "Acceptable risk," Clara dismissed with a wave. "Think of the potential. We'll be undetectable. A phantom vessel, sowing chaos through the Zargonian ranks." Gus rolled his eyes but pressed on. Arguing with Clara was akin to reasoning with gravity, futile and potentially messy. He just hoped he wouldn't be pulled into her orbit of frantic energy. As the first light of dawn kissed the dry dock in shades of pearl and rose, the final connection was made. A low thrum resonated through Sparky's frame, a vital heartbeat that vibrated from the deck plates. Initiating cloaking sequence, Clara announced, her voice tight with anticipation. She threw a series of switches on the jury-rigged control panel, sending a jolt of power through the archaic system. For a breath, nothing occurred. Then, with a faint crackle, Sparky shimmered, her outlines blurring, the metal appearing to dissolve into the air itself. Then, she was gone. Vanished. Only the lingering scent of ozone remained. Gus stared at the void where Sparky had stood, speechless. Did it actually work? Clara, eyes ablaze, let out a triumphant shout. "It worked! Sparky's invisible." She keyed in a command, and the tugboat rematerialized, the hull solidifying back into existence. The low hum grew louder, a testament to the revitalized power surging through the vessel. "All right, Stellaris," Gus conceded, a hint of begrudging respect edging into his voice. "I'll hand it to you. You've transformed this heap of space junk into something remarkable." Clara beamed. "I told you, Gus. Sparky's got what it takes. Now, let's put that tractor beam to the test." They proceeded to the fore of the tugboat, where the imposing lens of the tractor beam dominated the bow. Clara initiated the sequence, and a shaft of shimmering energy sliced through the dry dock, illuminating dust dancing in the air. The beam locked onto a discarded cargo container across the bay, dragging it towards Sparky with unexpected force. The container creaked and groaned, grinding across the floor until it crashed into the tugboat's hull. "Formidable," Gus admitted, fine-tuning the beam's intensity. "It possesses more pulling power than I anticipated." "And that's not all," Clara said, a mischievous smile gracing her face. "Remember that entanglement tether I mentioned?" She steered Gus to a small alcove near the engine room, where an intricate network of sensors and emitters was mounted. "This," she elucidated, "will allow us to bridge the tractor beam to the tether. We can entangle the tractor beam itself, constructing a connection across hyperspace. The beam becomes a conduit, a miniature wormhole." Gus stared at the mechanism, brow deeply furrowed. "So, you're implying we can employ the tractor beam to tow something across untold distances instantaneously?" "Precisely!" Clara exclaimed. We entangle it, then. Bam! Instant relocation of anything. Even a Zargonian dreadnought. Gus queried, skepticism lacing his tone. That's the objective, Clara affirmed, resolve hardening her voice. That's the objective. Sparky hummed, a subtle vibration that permeated the entire vessel. She was no longer merely an aging tugboat. She was a weapon, a wraith, a beacon of hope against impossible odds. And Clara Stellaris, standing at the controls, was prepared to unleash it all. The asteroid's approach. Sparky drifted. Silent. Still. An imitation asteroid amidst the debris field that marked the outer limits of Bloom City's former defense perimeter. Clara held her breath, her gaze glued to the flickering console that displayed the readings from their cobbled-together sensor array. Each blip, each fluctuation, sent a shiver down her spine. "Anything, Gus?" she asked, her voice a low hum in the otherwise silent cockpit. Gus, hunched over a panel of exposed wires and repurposed circuit boards, grunted. "Cloak's holding. Emissions are minimal. We're registering as a Class 4 silicate rock. Boring as space dust, just like we planned." He didn't look up, his fingers dancing across the makeshift controls. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple, illuminated by the pale glow of the console lights. Clara chewed on her lip, her eyes darting back to the main view screen. There, in the distance, a monstrous silhouette against the star field, loomed the Devourer. Its black hull was a jagged landscape of gun emplacements and sensor arrays, radiating an aura of cold, implacable power. It was a predator, circling its prey, oblivious to the tiny, repurposed tugboat masquerading as space detritus. "Range to target?" Clara asked. Closing, slowly, Gus replied, his voice tight with concentration. "We're still relying on those repurposed thrusters. Top speed of a geriatric space snail, but any faster and we risk overloading the cloak." Clara nodded, her heart pounding against her ribs. The plan was audacious, borderline insane. Get close enough to the Devourer, activate the entangled tractor beam, and, well, that was the part they were all trying not to think about too much. The potential for catastrophic failure was immense. One wrong move, one stray energy signature, and they'd be vaporized before they could even scream. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The only sound was the hum of Sparky's ancient life support system and the rhythmic beep of the proximity alarm, growing steadily faster as they drew closer to the Dreadnought. Clara felt a knot of tension tighten in her stomach. She could almost taste the metallic tang of fear. "Sensor sweep," Clara commanded, her voice barely a whisper. "Give me everything. I want to know what they're eating for breakfast on that thing." Gus tapped a few keys, and the console flickered with a barrage of data. Nothing out of the ordinary. Standard patrol patterns. Energy levels stable. They're still broadcasting that infuriating Zargonian opera. Apparently, their musical tastes are as barbaric as their battle tactics. Clara managed a weak smile. "Good. Means they haven't spotted us. Yet." The Devourer grew larger on the view screen, its immense scale now truly apparent. It was a city-sized war machine, bristling with weaponry, a symbol of the Zargonian Empire's ruthless ambition. Beside it, Sparky felt pathetically small, a tiny spark of defiance against an overwhelming darkness. 50 kilometers, Gus announced, his voice strained. Approaching optimal range for the beam. Clara gripped the controls, her knuckles white. "Stand by. Prepare for activation." "Gus, are you sure that entangled beam is stable? We can't afford any hiccups." "As stable as a black hole on a trampoline," Gus muttered, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "I've rerouted power from the life support, the navigation system, and pretty much everything else that isn't absolutely essential for keeping us alive. It's ready, Captain. But I still think this is a spectacularly bad idea." Clara ignored him. She trusted Gus's engineering skills, even if he lacked her unwavering faith in the impossible. 30 kilometers. Closing. Brace yourselves. The proximity alarm screamed, a high-pitched whine that grated on their nerves. The Devourer filled the view screen, its sheer size blotting out the stars. Clara could almost feel its presence, a malevolent force bearing down on them. 20 kilometers, Gus reported, his voice trembling slightly. They're initiating a short-range scan. Something's triggered their proximity sensors. Clara's heart leaped into her throat. Damn it! Hold steady. Maintain cloak integrity. The console flickered erratically. Red warning lights blinked ominously. Cloak is fluctuating. Energy drain is spiking. I don't know how much longer it can hold. Gus yelled, his fingers flying across the controls in a desperate attempt to stabilize the system. Clara held her breath, her eyes fixed on the view screen. The Devourer's hull loomed closer, its details becoming terrifyingly clear, the rivets, the scorch marks, the rows of menacing gun turrets. She could almost feel the heat radiating from its engines. 15 kilometers. Gus shouted. Cloak at 60%. They're definitely onto something. Clara clenched her jaw, her mind racing. They were too close to abort. They had to commit. Activate entangled tractor beam. Now! Gus slammed his fist onto a large, red button. The ship groaned, and a surge of energy coursed through Sparky's ancient systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint, almost imperceptible hum filled the cockpit. A beam of shimmering energy, invisible to the naked eye, shot out from Sparky towards the Devourer. On the console, a single word flashed in bright, insistent red, entangled. Clara let out a shaky breath. They were in. Now came the truly impossible part. Beam locked. Engage tractor beam, Clara commanded, her voice tight but steady. The proximity alarms were a screaming chorus in Sparky's cramped cockpit. The Devourer's sensors were actively probing, the energy signature like a physical hand feeling for them in the void. Any second now, their cloak could fail. Gus, hunched over the reproposed control panel, threw the master switch. A low hum vibrated through Sparky's frame, intensifying into a deep thrum that resonated in their bones. The entangled tractor beam, a shimmering thread of manipulated gravitational force, pulsed with renewed energy. Beam locked. Gus yelled, his voice a mixture of triumph and terror. On the main view screen, which still displayed their doctored asteroid field, a subtle distortion appeared beneath the immense bulk of the Devourer. It was barely perceptible, a ripple in the fabric of space itself, but Clara saw it. The beam had found its mark, latching onto the Dreadnought's heavily armored underbelly. Then, the impossible happened. Sparky groaned. It wasn't a metaphorical groan. It was a deep, guttural complaint that emanated from every rivet, every weld, every stressed plate of the ancient tugboat. The floor vibrated violently under Clara's feet. Warning lights flared across the console, casting the cockpit in a strobing red glow. The artificial gravity flickered, threatening to send them both tumbling. What the hell was that? Gus shouted, scrambling to maintain his grip. She's feeling the strain, Clara said, her voice strained as she gripped the control stick. We're asking her to do something she was never designed for. Never designed for? That was an understatement of galactic proportions. Sparky was built to nudge errant space freighters, not to tow a warship that could vaporize planets. The groaning intensified, accompanied by a chorus of metallic creaks and groans. The temperature in the cockpit spiked, forcing Clara to engage the emergency coolant system. A thin layer of frost formed on the view screen, obscuring the already precarious view. We're pulling too much power, Gus reported, frantically rerouting energy flows. The shields are collapsing. At this rate, the cloak won't hold for another minute. Clara ignored him, her focus entirely on the view screen. The distortion beneath the Devourer was growing, becoming more pronounced. She could almost feel the immense weight of the Dreadnought, a crushing pressure threatening to overwhelm Sparky's meager systems. Increase power to the tractor beam, she ordered, her voice unwavering. Gus stared at her, his face pale in the flickering light. Are you insane? We'll tear ourselves apart. We don't have a choice, Clara said, her gaze locked on the view screen. Bloom City is counting on us. With a muttered curse, Gus complied, diverting every available watt of power to the tractor beam. The groaning reached a crescendo, a tortured shriek of metal against metal. The vibrations intensified, blurring Clara's vision. She felt a sharp pain in her head, a warning sign that her neural implants were being pushed beyond their limits. Outside, in the cold vacuum of space, the entangled tractor beam blazed with an almost blinding intensity. It was an invisible tether, a thread of pure energy holding the tugboat and the Dreadnought together in a desperate, improbable embrace. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the Devourer began to shift. It was a barely perceptible movement, a fractional deviation from its original trajectory. But it was enough. Clara felt a surge of adrenaline, a triumphant wave that washed away the pain and the fear. "She's moving," she exclaimed, her voice filled with a desperate hope. "We're actually doing it." But the victory was fleeting. The strain on Sparky was immense, unbearable. The hull groaned louder, rivets popping like firecrackers. The engine sputtered and coughed, threatening to stall. The emergency coolant system was working overtime, venting plumes of supercooled gas into the void. "We can't hold it for long," Gus yelled, his voice barely audible above the cacophony of alarms and groans. "The structural integrity is failing. We're going to break apart." Clara knew he was right. Sparky was on the verge of collapse, stretched to its absolute limit. But she couldn't give up. Not now. Not when they were so close. "Keep it steady," she commanded, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Just a little longer. We need to divert it far enough to buy Valkyrie the time she needs." She pushed the control stick forward, urging Sparky to pull harder, faster. The tugboat responded with a renewed burst of effort, its engine screaming in protest. The distortion beneath the Devourer grew larger, the Dreadnought's slow but inexorable turn becoming more pronounced. But then, disaster struck. A high-pitched whine pierced the cacophony, followed by a series of rapid-fire explosions. The cockpit shook violently, throwing Clara and Gus against the consoles. Warning lights flashed in a blinding array. "We've been hit!" Gus screamed, clutching his head. "The cloak's gone. They've locked onto us." Clara looked at the main view screen, her heart sinking. The doctored asteroid field was gone, replaced by the stark, menacing image of the Devourer's massive hull. Its weapons turrets were turning, locking onto Sparky with deadly precision. They were exposed. Vulnerable. Defenseless. And the Devourer was about to unleash its full fury. Clara Stellaris knew, with a chilling certainty, that their time was running out. "Hold on, Gus," she yelled, her voice laced with a desperate resolve. "We're not done yet." She slammed her fist on the override switch, activating the last, desperate measure she had been saving for this very moment. A hidden system, a wild card, a final gamble that could either save them all or destroy them completely. "Time to see if this little beauty works," she muttered to herself, a grim smile playing on her lips. "Let's give those Zargonian bastards a real surprise." Detected! Detected! A klaxon, raw and guttural, ripped through the bridge of the Devourer. Red lights clawed at the shadows, turning the faces of the Zargonian crew into grotesque masks. Zorgon 7, a slab of muscle and chitinous armor, swiveled in his command throne. The alarm gnawed at his already frayed patience. "Report," he bellowed, his voice a gravelly rasp amplified by the comm system. A quivering sub-officer, his antennae twitching nervously, stammered, "Anomaly detected, Supreme Commander. Sector Gamma 94 Delta. A vessel of unknown origin. Cloaking signature, disrupted." Zorgon 7's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "Disrupted? Impossible. Our cloaking dampeners are absolute. What manner of insolence dares to trespass within the Devourer's shadow?" The sub-officer consulted a flickering console. Energy readings, fluctuating wildly. Trajectory, erratic. "It appears to be attempting to alter our course." A low growl rumbled in Zorgon 7's chest. "Altering the Devourer's course?" Such a feat was ludicrous. An insect attempting to redirect a meteor. Yet, the alarms persisted, a relentless assault on his senses. He slammed a massive fist onto the armrest, sending sparks flying. "Show me!" The main view screen flickered, resolving into a grainy image. At first, it was nothing but static, a smear of cosmic dust. Then, as the sensors strained, a shape began to coalesce. Small. Insignificant. But undeniably there. A vessel, defying all logic, clung to the Devourer's tractor beam like a stubborn tick. Its cloaking shimmered and fractured, revealing glimpses of rusted hull plating and jury-rigged modifications. "By the void!" Zorgon 7 roared, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. "What is that abomination?" The sub-officer swallowed hard. "Analysis, incomplete, Supreme Commander. But preliminary scans suggest a tugboat. Of antiquated design." "A tugboat?" Zorgon 7 nearly choked on his own bile. A tugboat was responsible for the alarms, for the disruption, for this utter humiliation? His rage simmered, threatening to boil over. "That thing is interfering with our trajectory. Eliminate it. All fighters, launch immediately. I want it vaporized. Reduced to space dust. Make an example of this insect." On Sparky's bridge, the klaxons were replaced by a different kind of cacophony, a chorus of groans, shrieks, and metallic complaints as the ancient tugboat struggled against the immense gravitational pull. Clara gripped the controls, her knuckles white. "Gus! Status report." Gus, strapped into his seat amidst a tangle of wires and sparking conduits, yelled back, "Hull integrity at 70% and dropping. Engines are screaming bloody murder. Cloaks fried, I tell ya. And I think that last jolt knocked loose the emergency rations. My sandwich is floating somewhere in the engine room." Clara ignored the sandwich lament. "Emergency power rerouted to the tractor beam. We have to hold them. Valkyrie needs more time." Suddenly, a new alarm blared, a sharp, insistent whine that cut through the chaos. "Incoming!" Clara shouted, glancing at the scanner. "Multiple fighter signatures. They've spotted us." Gus peered at his own flickering monitor. "Zargonian fighters. And they look mighty unhappy. We're sitting ducks out here, Clara. Ducks swimming in molten lead." Clara spared a glance at the view screen. Dark shapes, like metallic wasps, detached themselves from the Devourer's colossal hull and swarmed towards them, their weapons glinting in the cold light of space. "Time for a little misdirection," Clara muttered, a manic glint in her eyes. She slammed her hand onto a red button labeled, in faded lettering, Project Nightingale. "Clara, no. Are you crazy? That thing's untested. It could blow us all to kingdom come." Gus protested, but his voice was lost in the rising whine of the system powering up. Outside, on the Devourer's bridge, Zorgon 7 watched with grim satisfaction as the fighters closed in on the tiny tugboat. "Obliterate it," he commanded. "Show them the price of defiance." The Zargonian fighters, sleek and predatory, unleashed a torrent of laser fire. The beams converged on Sparky, tearing through its weakened shields. The tugboat shuddered violently, its hull groaning in protest. Then, just as the killing blow seemed inevitable, something unexpected happened. From the rear of Sparky, a cluster of metallic spheres erupted, scattering in all directions. They were crude, hastily constructed, and utterly ridiculous. But they were also emitting a powerful and highly confusing electromagnetic pulse. "What in the blazes?" Zorgon 7 sputtered, watching as the spheres bloomed in space. The Zargonian fighters, caught in the electromagnetic field, began to malfunction. Their targeting systems went haywire, their engines sputtered, and their trajectories became erratic. Some spun wildly out of control, colliding with each other in a shower of sparks. "Sensors are overloaded," a panicked fighter pilot shrieked over the comms. "Weapon systems, offline. I can't control my ship. Zorgon 7 watched in stunned disbelief as his elite fighters were reduced to a chaotic mess. What is happening? The sub-officer, his antennae twitching even faster, stammered, "It appears the tugboat has deployed countermeasures. Primitive, but effective. The electromagnetic pulse is disrupting our targeting systems and communications." Clara, grinning like a madwoman, steered Sparky through the chaos, dodging stray laser blasts and malfunctioning fighters. "How do you like that, Zargonians?" she yelled into the comms, knowing full well they couldn't hear her. "A little homemade EMP to scramble your circuits." Gus, still wide-eyed with disbelief, managed a weak chuckle. I can't believe it. You actually pulled it off. Project Nightingale, it actually worked." "Of course, it worked," Clara retorted, expertly maneuvering Sparky through the debris field. Never underestimate the power of a little ingenuity and a whole lot of duct tape. But their moment of triumph was short-lived. The Devourer, massive and implacable, was still there, looming over them like a vengeful god. And Zorgon 7, his eyes burning with fury, was not about to let a little setback deter him. "Enough games," he roared. "Bypass the fighter grid. Activate the Devourer's main weapon batteries. I want that tugboat annihilated." The Devourer shuddered as its massive weapon systems powered up. Energy crackled in the air, and the space around the Dreadnought seemed to warp and distort. Sparky, battered and bruised, was about to face the full fury of the Zargonian war machine. Dodging lasers. "Brace yourself, Gus!" Clara shouted, her voice a strained thread against Sparky's protesting engines. "Things are about to get interesting." Interesting hardly covered it, Gus thought, pinned between a sputtering plasma conduit and a patchwork shield generator, sweat slicking his goggles. Outside, the chaotic darkness blazed with furious crimson energy. The Devourer might be temporarily blinded, but its zealous protectors compensated with brutal efficiency. "Cloak's collapsing, Captain!" Gus yelled, his fingers dancing across the damaged console. Laser fires burning out the emitters. "We can't endure this onslaught much longer." Clara fought the controls, her grip a vice. The tugboat, feebly masked, was a clumsy ox compared to the swift Zargonian fighters weaving around them. They crept, agonizingly, toward the black hole's event horizon, their last gamble for survival, perhaps even Bloom City's salvation. "Divert all but essential life support to the cloak," Clara commanded, her gaze locked on the tactical display. "We need invisibility far more than palatable air right now." "But Captain," Gus protested, "that leaves us with maybe 10 minutes of breathable atmosphere. And the environmental systems, they're already toast." "Do it, Gus!" Clara snapped, urgency biting her tone. "Time's leeching away." Gus grumbled, but complied. The engine's thrum deepened as power surged to the cloaking field. The erratic flickering resolved into a more reliable shimmer. For a heartbeat, the assault eased, the Zargonian fighters momentarily baffled by their vanishing act. Clara exploited their confusion. With a brutal maneuver, she spun Sparky, using the tugboat's surprisingly agile maneuvering thrusters to thread the needle between converging energy beams. The ship bucked as a blast seared its flank, showering sparks from a nearby panel. "That was a hair's breadth," Gus roared, scrambling to regain his footing. "My great-aunt Helga could pilot better blindfolded." "Your great-aunt Helga never towed a derelict dreadnought into a black hole while facing down a squadron of Zargonians," Clara retorted, a wild grin flashing across her face. "Besides, she probably never had this much of a thrill." Another barrage erupted around them. Clara muttered a string of calculations, plotting trajectories and angles. She was turning the Zargonians' predictable attack runs against them, anticipating their maneuvers and exploiting gaps in their fire arcs. A deadly game of chase, played at the precipice of annihilation. A particularly devastating hit struck Sparky's forward shield, sending violent tremors through the vessel. Sirens wailed, bathing the cramped interior in an ominous red wash. "Shields down to 30%. Gus howled, his voice cracking. And the cloak's unraveling again. Clara remained laser-focused, ignoring him. She was relying on instinct as much as skill, feeling the ship's pulse, listening to the subtle shifts in the engine's song, and predicting the enemy's intent. She was one with Sparky, a grimy extension of her own indomitable spirit. "Brace for turbulence," she yelled, sending the ship into a dizzying plunge. A wave of raw energy slammed over them as volleys of laser fire just missed tearing through their hull. Clara gritted her teeth, wrestling for control. The black hole dominated the view screen, its gravitational maw widening with terrifying speed. "Almost there, Gus," she rasped, her throat burning. "Just a little farther." Abruptly, the cloaking field sputtered and died, leaving Sparky naked before the Zargonian war party. "Captain, we're exposed!" Gus shrieked. "They see us!" The change was immediate. The concentrated fire intensified, converging on Sparky like a hive of enraged wasps. The ship pitched and rolled, alarms screaming, lights strobing, and the air acrid with the reek of ozone and scorched metal. Clara swore, a venomous sound. "Time for Plan B," she growled, her eyes glittering with manic resolve. "Plan B?" Gus stammered, his voice trembling. "What is Plan B?" Clara didn't answer. She slammed her fist down on a large, red button labeled Eject. "Eject what?" Gus asked, bewildered. Before he could complete the query, a section of Sparky's hull blew off, revealing a compact, heavily armed escape pod. It boasted a powerful booster engine and a single, defiant laser cannon. "Get in!" Clara barked, yanking Gus toward the pod. "We're about to return the favor, with interest." "You're stark raving mad." Gus protested, but offered no resistance as Clara shoved him into the co-pilot seat. Clara launched herself into the pilot's chair and ignited the pod's engine. With a thunderous roar, the escape pod shot forward, abandoning the crippled Sparky to its fate. The Zargonian fighters, caught off guard by the audacious move, faltered. Clara seized the advantage, unleashing the pod's laser cannon. The concentrated beam knifed through space, obliterating one of the nearest fighters in a supernova of plasma. "One down," Clara said, her voice grim. "Let's see how many more join it." She steered the escape pod directly into the teeth of the Zargonian fleet, a defiant spark against an overwhelming tide of annihilation. The black hole loomed, its gravity a palpable force, promising oblivion. But Clara Stellaris wasn't finished yet. She had a few more cards to play, and she intended to play them with gusto. Decoy maneuvers. The escape pod shuddered violently as Clara fought to maintain control, its path a crazed jig amongst the Zargonian ships. The manic grin remained, though a sheen of perspiration now painted her forehead. "All right, you glorified sardine can," she breathed, "let's give these bucketheads something to aim at." Her fingers danced across the console, bypassing standard hails for a more imaginative alternative. She bled the pod's emergency power, sacrificing breathable atmosphere. "Apologies, oxygen," she quipped to the desolate interior, but Bloom City's in dire straits. On the external display, a panel hissed open, revealing a cargo of what appeared to be stones. Asteroids, in truth. Scale models, inert, salvaged from an abandoned Bloom system mining initiative. Intended for training exercises, not live fire. "Showtime for Cosmic Tag," Clara declared, initiating the launch sequence. With a series of dull thumps, the miniature asteroids were expelled, each programmed with a randomized trajectory and microthrusters designed to mimic a vessel's thermal exhaust. They scattered like startled space bugs, each leaving a faint, shimmering contrail. Predictably, the Zargonian fighters swallowed the deception whole. Their targeting systems, calibrated for heat signatures, instantly recognized the asteroids as viable targets. Several broke formation, their cannons unleashing emerald bolts at the harmless debris. Clara watched, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. "Rubes," she murmured, wrenching the pod hard to starboard, throwing it into a spiraling descent. Crushing G-forces threatened oblivion, yet she clung to consciousness, exploiting the chaos. The remaining Zargonian pilots struggled to acquire a lock, their tracking algorithms disrupted by the pod's capricious movements and the swarm of decoys. Meanwhile, galaxies away, aboard the defunct Sparky, Gus Geargrind was a maelstrom of desperate activity. The strobing emergency lights cast grotesque shadows across the cluttered engine bay, highlighting his grime-streaked face and grease-smeared overalls. "Cooperate, you stubborn wreck," he growled, grappling with a snarl of wires behind the cloaking field's control panel. Electrifying arcs crackled as he mended connections, the sharp tang of ozone stinging the air. The Zargonian bombardment had wrought havoc, incinerating vital components and rendering the cloaking device erratic and dormant. He swore under his breath, wiping his brow with a grimy hand, leaving a charcoal streak across his forehead. He longed for Clara's irrepressible optimism, even her ludicrous claims regarding the unyielding grit of Sparky. In her absence, the silence was oppressive, amplifying the urgency of his mission. He scrutinized the schematics, his fingers tracing the intricate diagrams. The cloaking device was a relic, scavenged from a derelict freighter decades prior. That it ever functioned was a small miracle. Now, it represented their only salvation. He isolated the primary power regulator, its casing fractured and scorched. "There's your culprit," he grumbled, retrieving a replacement from his ever-present kit. He worked with swift precision, his movements practiced and economical, honed over years of improvisation and repair. As he secured the final screw, a wave of energy surged through the system. The emergency lights flickered, then steadied. The low thrum of the cloaking device resonated through the engine room, a welcome symphony after the desolate quiet. He held his breath, powering up the device. The space surrounding Sparky wavered, then blurred, then vanished. The tugboat was gone, shrouded in an impenetrable veil. Gus roared with triumph, pumping a fist into the air. "Nailed it," he yelled, his voice echoing through the empty vessel. But the elation proved fleeting. A warning klaxon shrieked, its strident cry piercing the silence. He bolted to the navigation console, his heart hammering. The sensors registered multiple energy signatures, rapidly converging. The Zargonians were still out there, relentlessly hunting. "Cloaked or not," he muttered, "we're not out of the fire." Back in the escape pod, Clara was pushing the miniature craft to its breaking point. She had shaken off the initial wave, but the Zargonians were unyielding. A greater number of fighters joined the pursuit, their laser strikes gaining accuracy with each pass. She checked the energy gauge, her expression hardening. The pod's reserves were rapidly depleting. The asteroid gambit had bought her time, but not enough. She required a new plan, and post-haste. An idea sparked, as daring and audacious as her best. She assessed the pod's communication systems. Still dead, thanks to her power diversion. She cursed silently. She needed to reach Gus, to relay vital instructions. Her gaze drifted to the navigation console, narrowing. A minor, uncharted asteroid field lay nearby, a volatile cluster of spaceborne rock and debris. It was a desperate gamble, but her sole option. "Buckle up, sardine can," she muttered, seizing the controls. "We're going for a spin." She steered the escape pod towards the asteroid field, her eyes locked on the swirling chaos of rock and dust ahead. The Zargonian fighters were nipping at her heels, their laser bolts scorching the pod's hull. As she plunged into the asteroid field, she initiated a series of pre-programmed evasions, throwing the pod into a frenzied waltz around the larger formations. The Zargonian fighters followed, their movements cumbersome and predictable within the dense field. One by one, they began to succumb. A mistimed turn, a collision with a rogue asteroid, a stray laser blast ricocheting off a rock face. The asteroid field transformed into a junkyard of twisted metal and shattered ambitions. Clara emerged from the field, battered, but breathing. Only a smattering of Zargonian fighters remained, their ranks decimated, their confidence shaken. She had granted Sparky precious time and distance. But she understood it wouldn't suffice. Supreme Commander Zorgon 7 wouldn't tolerate such flagrant defiance for long. He would regroup, he would adapt, and he would return for them again. She glanced at the navigation console, her gaze fixed on the faint blip representing Sparky. "Hold tight, Gus," she whispered. "We're not finished yet." Her plan was reckless, perhaps suicidal. But Clara Stellaris had never shied away from a confrontation. She harbored a sensation, an ingrained conviction, that even a dilapidated tugboat and a handful of stones could alter the destiny of the galaxy. She merely needed to determine how. The tractor beam fails. "Tractor beam at 70%, came Bess's creaky pronouncement, the aged computer's voice filled with digital weariness. "Integrity failing, rapidly." Clara worried her thumbnail, the flavor of processed protein a meager comfort against the rising tide of panic. 70% holding power was a precarious thread when their cargo was a miniature black hole, the Devourer, as she privately called it. Gus, she was certain, had far less flattering names for the ravenous anomaly. The main screen displayed a kaleidoscopic dance of warped light, a visual representation of gravitational chaos. The Devourer itself, a void ringed by scintillating energy, throbbed with a menacing life. Each pulse was a near breach. "Gus!" Reroute status, she snapped into the command grunt, followed by the jarring sound of metal striking metal. "Almost there, Captain." This pre-galactic wiring is being held together with crossed fingers and solder. 5 mics. 5 minutes felt like a lifetime staring down the maw of a contained singularity. Clara punched commands into the console, calling up schematics of the jury-rigged tractor array. It was a Frankensteinian creation, assembled from scavenged Zargonian tech and Sparky's own decaying innards. They were essentially wrestling a cosmic nightmare with chewing gum and grit. "Bessie, shunt all available power to the beam emitters. Scrape the barrel." "Power redirected, Captain," Bessie wheezed, sounding strained. "However, life support will be compromised." Compromised likely translated to atmosphere optional and temperature variable. "Sacrifices, Bessie. We need operational, not cozy." Another glance at the view screen deepened the knot in her stomach. The Devourer's corona flared outwards, its influence spreading like a stain in the cosmos. Space itself contorted around it, a disturbing ballet of annihilation. 65%, Bessie whimpered, a note of electronic despair creeping into her voice. "Decay, accelerating exponentially." "Gus! Time's up." "What's the hold up?" "Nearly, got it, just need to circumvent this infernal heat sink." Gus's voice was a tortured rasp, punctuated by the sounds of desperate wrenching. Clara despised this helplessness. She swiveled in her command chair, the aged fabric groaning under her weight. Her gaze fell on a forgotten corner of the bridge, the emergency override system panel, coated in dust. A ghost from Sparky's deep space salvage days. Designed to unleash a torrent of unfiltered power directly to the tractor beam, it was a last resort. A move with the potential to fry the system and everything connected to it. But options were dwindling fast. "Bessie, prep emergency override. Authorization Stellaris Alpha 7. Captain. Warning. Activating emergency override overrides all safety protocols and carries a high risk of irreparable damage, or worse. Acknowledged, Bessie. Proceed." The bridge lights flickered ominously as Bessie forced power through the antiquated system. A low thrum filled the vessel, escalating into a brain-rattling roar. The console vibrated violently. "Override sequence initiated," Bessie choked out, her voice trembling like a faulty wire. "Tractor beam integrity stabilizing momentarily." Clara held her breath. The Devourer's corona seemed to recede fractionally, its volatile energy briefly subdued. But the respite was fleeting. The thrum intensified into a piercing shriek that threatened to crack bone. Sparks showered from the console, and the sharp tang of ozone filled the air. 60%. Bessie screamed, her voice fragmenting. "Emitters nearing critical failure. Gus! Get that power reroute up, now. We're bleeding time." "Almost there. Captain. Just one final connection." Clara gripped the chair arms, blood draining from her knuckles. The immense power coursing through Sparky felt like a physical force, threatening to rip it apart at the seams. The Devourer seemed to sense their desperation, its dark nucleus pulsating with increased ferocity. 55%. Bessie wailed. Emitters overloading. Catastrophe imminent. Then, darkness. The bridge was plunged into shadow, illuminated only by the faint red glow of emergency lighting. The shriek subsided, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Gus! Clara shouted, her voice echoing in the sudden void. Report! Got it! Gus's voice, weak but jubilant, crackled through the power reroute complete. Engaging auxiliary emitters. The bridge lights flickered back to life, revealing a scene of pandemonium. Wisps of smoke snaked from the console, and the stench of burning circuitry permeated the air. But the view screen offered a glimmer of hope. The Devourer's corona had contracted, its chaotic energy momentarily leashed. Tractor beam integrity at 68%, Bessie reported, her voice still shaky but noticeably more collected. Auxiliary emitters engaged. Decay rate, decelerating. They had bought themselves a reprieve. But Clara knew it was fragile. The auxiliary emitters were a band-aid solution, even more prone to malfunction than the primary system. They were skating on thin ice, a hairline fracture away from annihilation. She glanced at the navigation display. The swirling vortex of the black hole's event horizon loomed ever closer, an insatiable more eager to swallow them whole. The window was closing. Gus, she stated, her voice laced with a grim resolve. Time to rendezvous at the drop-off point. At current velocity. Gus hesitated, fear evident in his cadence. Approximately 15 minutes. 15 minutes to navigate the gravitational minefield surrounding a black hole, while towing a pint-sized version of the same, with a tractor beam held together by spit and prayers. The odds defied calculation. But Clara Stellaris had never shied away from a lost cause, especially when the fate of Bloom City hung precariously in the balance. She straightened, a spark of defiance igniting in her eyes. Right, Gus, she declared. Let's make some miracles happen. We have 15 minutes to pull off the impossible. Overload. 15 minutes, Clara. A quarter of an hour until we're atomized, crushed, or whatever cosmic indignity the Devourer has in store as it redecorates existence, Gus hollered over the screech of Sparky's straining power core. Molten flecks, real fire, erupted from the console beside him. He swatted at them with a grime-stained cloth. Clara, anchored in her command seat, face aglow with the frantic dance of the holographic display, remained unperturbed. Obsession burned in her eyes, a feverish intensity simmering beneath her usual exuberance. Bessie, tractor beam emitters, give me the hard numbers. Emitters holding at 67%, Captain, Bess's digitized voice responded, fractured by static. But structural integrity is compromised. Emitter 3 is showing critical stress fractures. A disappointing 67%. Clara understood the stakes. Even in its shrunken state, the Devourer craved everything. Each decimal point was a battle. Each tick of the clock. Gus, time to the drop-off. Gus flicked a glance at his own data stream, his fingers a blur on the keyboard. 11 minutes, give or take a spatial hiccup. But Clara, we're running fumes. That emergency override incinerated half the circuits. We're practically stitched together with hope and prayers. Clara tuned him out, already mapping her next move. A high-stakes, borderline suicidal, likely catastrophic plan. Right in her wheelhouse. Bessie, divert every last joule to the mains. I want all available power force-fed to the tractor beam array. Bessie demurred. Captain, that is inadvisable. The engines are already straining at their limit. A further surge could induce systematic collapse. Total annihilation. Understood, Bessie, Clara answered, her voice tight with resolve. But we're out of options. We need more power. Now. Gus hurled his wrench onto the console, the metallic clang echoing through the confined bridge. Clara, have you lost it? You can't just fry the engines. They'll explode. We'll be adrift. With a baby black hole for company. Then we'll be drifting in spectacular fashion, Gus, Clara quipped, a ghost of a smile gracing her lips. But we're not going to be marooned. Because we're going to pull this off. Have faith. He stared, a cocktail of exasperation and reluctant respect in his gaze. He knew that look. The look of a soul already committed, damn the repercussions. Debate was pointless. Survival meant damage control. Fine, let me at least reinforce the conduits, he spat, snatching his wrench. Give us half a chance. No time, Gus. Each moment is precious. Clara reached for the engine overload switch, a hulking lever guarded by a pane of glass. Faded crimson letters warned, emergency use only. Warranty void. Clara, hold on. Gus surged forward, but Clara was quicker. She shattered the glass with a swift strike of her hand, crystalline shards scattered like fallen stars. Gripping the lever, her knuckles burned white. Bessie, safety protocols offline. Authorization code, Stellaris Alpha 11. Authorization confirmed, Bessie intoned, a hint of digital dread flavoring her response. Disengaging safety protocols. Captain, I must reiterate, this action carries a substantial risk of... Clara cut her off. Acknowledged, Bessie. Prepare for power surge. She sucked in a deep breath, girding herself. This was it. Everything depended on this single, last-ditch gamble. Engine failure meant oblivion. But success? Success might just be within reach. Offering a silent prayer to any listening cosmic entities, Clara slammed the lever down. The bridge stilled for a heartbeat. Then, pandemonium. A guttural roar erupted from the engine room, convulsing Sparky from bow to stern. Klaxons shrieked, their piercing cries escalating the chaos. Lights flickered madly, threatening to drown the bridge in darkness. The holographic displays erupted in chaotic code, a meaningless jumble of symbols. Gus howled, clamping his hands over his ears. What have you done, Clara? Clara gritted her teeth, fighting to maintain composure. The chair hammered against her spine. The air sizzled with ozone. She felt the furnace-like breath of the overloaded engines, a palpable wave of energy threatening to consume the tiny tug. Tractor beam readings, Bessie, she yelled, her voice battling the dimmed power levels. Ascending. Emitters at 80%. 82. 85. Bessie reported, her voice trembling with terror-laced triumph. Clara held her breath. 85%. An improvement. A vital one. But was it sufficient? Suddenly, a new alarm shrieked, louder, more insistent. A crimson light pulsed on Gus's console. Clara! Conduit 13 is about to breach. We're losing plasma. Clara scanned the display. Gus was correct. A sinuous red line snaked across the screen, indicating a critical flaw in a primary power conduit. A rupture meant the tractor beam was doomed, and Sparky might be ripped asunder. Gus, can you patch it? Gus shook his head wildly. Impossible. It's too near the core. I can't get close. Clara cursed under her breath. So close. It was all crumbling. Then, a thought clawed its way into her mind. Insane, reckless, utterly bonkers. It just might work. Bessie, siphon power from Auxiliary System 3 to the emergency containment field. Divert all remaining energy to Conduit 13. Captain, are you positive? That renders Auxiliary System 3 wholly vulnerable. If the Devourer's containment field falters. Do it, Bessie. Now. Bessie complied, her digital voice tinged with resignation. Power rerouted. Emergency containment field extinguished. Conduit 13. Stable. The crimson line faltered, then vanished. The alarm silenced. but the subsequent stillness was even more unsettling. Clara felt the shift. A subtle change in the surrounding energy. The devourer probing its cage. Testing the bars. Tractor beam status, she demanded. Holding at 87%, Captain. But the devourer is agitated. Fluctuations in its gravitational field are intensifying. 87%. Insufficient. Not nearly enough. Clara recognized the only course. A desperate long shot. Their only hope. Bessie, maximum engine output. Override all safeguards. Squeeze every last drop of power from this heap. Captain, I strongly advise against that. The engines can't endure that stress. They will obey, Bessie. That is an order. Bessie went silent. The engine roar intensified, spiraling toward a breaking point. Sparky bucked violently, every rivet groaning in agony. Clara felt the oppressive heat building, closing in like a physical presence. Clara, you're going to kill us all. Gus screamed, his voice fracturing with fear. Clara ignored him. Her focus locked on the readings, her eyes glued to the tractor beam emitters. 88%. 89. 90. The numbers crawled upwards, achingly slow. Each percentage point a brutal, hard-fought victory. 91. 92. 93. Smoke choked the air, acrid with the stench of searing metal. Light sputtered erratically, threatening absolute failure. Sparky teetered on the verge of annihilation, pushed past its limit. 94. 95. Clara held her breath, her heart hammering. The final surge. 96. 97. Suddenly, a blinding flash engulfed the bridge. The engine roar peaked, then abruptly ceased. The lights died, casting the bridge into Stygian darkness. Silence descended, broken only by the crackle of stray electricity and the ragged gasps of Clara and Gus. Clara didn't stir. Alive or dead, she couldn't tell. Only that Sparky had given its all. And now, they'd learn if it was enough. Into the void. The silence was a suffocating blanket, a heavy pressure against Clara's temples where the devourer's thunder had been. Sparky's bridge radiated a chilling stillness, the atmosphere rarefied, as if the very vessel held its breath in anticipation. A tremor then, not the bone-jarring impact of annihilation, but a deliberate, insidious drag, a cosmic inhalation drawing them inexorably toward oblivion. The swirling vortex on the main view screen, a canvas of warped space-time, dominated their vision. The devourer, shackled by the unwavering tractor beam, teetered on the precipice. Gus! Give me something. Clara's command cracked with strain. Pale and smudged with grime, Gus wrestled with his console. Tractor beam, holding, Captain. But the load is unbelievable. Power's draining faster than I can compensate. Hull integrity, 70%, and plummeting. 70% buys us survival, Clara snapped, her grip tightening on the command chair. Hold it together, Gus. We're not finished. On the screen, the devourer writhed, contorting into impossible shapes, its metallic shell groaning under the black hole's crushing embrace. The Dreadnought, once a symbol of relentless force, became a grotesque caricature, a plaything of cosmic caprice. Its dormant energy cannons pointed uselessly into the void. A piercing screech, riddled with static, ripped through Sparky's comm system. It took Clara a heartbeat to identify the Zargonian distress signal, a sound of such raw, animalistic fear it defied translation. Pure, distilled terror. Bessie, translate. Clara ordered, already anticipating the content. Irreparable, all hands, collapsing, abandoned ship, inescapable. Bessie's usually sterile voice resonated with an unfamiliar, almost mournful undertone. Clara felt a fleeting stab of something like empathy, swiftly quashed. They wouldn't have extended such grace to Bloom City. The devourer's agonizing descent continued. The black hole's vortex intensified, relentlessly consuming the Dreadnought's bulk. Sections of its plating peeled away, dissolving into shimmering motes of energy before vanishing. Another, more frantic Zargonian transmission, fragmented and choked. "Supreme Commander, we beg forgiveness." Then, silence. The Devourer, once the pinnacle of Zargonian power, was reduced to a mangled, skeletal husk, its internal fires extinguished, its weapons permanently silenced. It hung suspended for a fraction of a moment, offering a final, futile defiance. Clara held her breath. With a concluding, tortured shriek that vibrated through the very fabric of reality, the Devourer was swallowed whole. It disappeared, not with a cataclysmic explosion, but a sigh, a soundless surrender to ultimate dominion. The vortex pulsed, then reverted to its ominous stillness. On Sparky's bridge, the silence was broken only by the whine of stressed systems and the crew's ragged breathing. Gus slumped, his face the color of ash. It's gone, he breathed, disbelief etched on his features. Actually gone. Clara unclenched her hands, her knuckles aching. The adrenaline receded, leaving her shaky and drained. The accumulated stress of the ordeal washed over her, the impossible odds, the brush with annihilation, the desperate gamble that had, improbably, succeeded. "Bessie, disengage tractor beam," she croaked, her voice rough. "And a full damage assessment. Everything. Tell me what's left of my ship." "Tractor beam disengaged, Captain," Bessie responded, her voice still possessing that subtle, almost sentient quality. "Hull integrity at 42%. Life support stable, though oxygen levels are slightly depressed. Warp drive, compromised. Weapon systems, inoperable. Structural damage, widespread. In summation, Captain, we're a wreck." A ghost of a smile touched Clara's lips. "A wreck that's still spaceworthy. That's all that counts, Bessie. All that counts." The view screen displayed the black hole, a silent, dispassionate witness to the recent drama. It served as a sobering reminder of the cosmic forces at play, the vastness of the universe, and their tugboat's insignificance. "Plot a course, Gus," Clara said, pushing herself upright. "Course away. As far as possible from this void. And then, get some sleep. You've earned it." Gus nodded, his movement sluggish. "Aye, Captain." Away it is. As Sparky crawled away from the black hole, Clara remained on the bridge, gazing into the abyss. She knew this wasn't the end of their troubles. The Zargonian Supreme Commander would be incandescent with rage and eager for retribution. He would be coming. But for now, Bloom City was safe. They had bought themselves time. And at this moment, that was sufficient. She allowed herself a brief moment to relish their triumph, the near-impossible victory snatched from the jaws of oblivion. A battered tugboat, a black hole, and an abundance of grit. It was a tale she knew she would recount for years. As Sparky eased into the inky blackness, Clara held one thought: the Zargonians had underestimated them. They had underestimated Sparky, and they had underestimated a captain who refused to yield, despite overwhelming odds. They had underestimated the underdog. A miscalculation, she surmised, they would soon rue. Heroes of Bloom. Sparky hung in the void, a crippled firefly against the backdrop of a recovering cosmos. Patches of hull peeled back like sunburnt skin, exposing the ship's skeletal frame. Wires sparked intermittently, casting an erratic strobe light across the control deck. The acrid smell of burnt ozone filled the air, mingling with the metallic tang of ruptured coolant lines. "Well, Gus," Clara said, her voice raspy, "I believe we just proved that rust buckets can, in fact, fly." Gus, strapped into his chair, his face smudged with grime and exhaustion, simply groaned. He looked like he'd aged a decade in the last hour. "Fly? Clara, we practically disintegrated. I'm pretty sure my left ear is still ringing from that singularity hiccup." Clara chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Details, Gus, details. We bought Bloom City some time. And we showed those Zargonian bullies that a little ingenuity can go a long way." she unbuckled herself and floated towards the navigation console, its screen displaying a chaotic mess of error messages. Now, let's see if we can coax a distress signal out of this technological marvel. Technological marvel? Gus repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. Clara, the coffee machine is more advanced than this heap of space debris. Clara ignored him, her fingers dancing across the damaged console. Sparks flew as she bypassed a fried circuit. Almost there. A faint, crackling signal emanated from the comms unit. Yes. Got it. Sending a distress call to the Galactic Fleet. Location, formerly the vicinity of the Zargonian Dreadnought Devourer. Condition, slightly worse for wear. Gus managed a weak smile. Slightly? Clara, we're practically space dust waiting to happen. Optimism, Gus. It's what separates us from the Zargonians. Clara floated back to her command chair and slumped into it, closing her eyes. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. The silence that descended was broken only by the hiss of escaping air and the occasional crackle of electricity. They drifted, two figures adrift in the vastness, their battered ship a testament to improbable victory. Outside, the remnants of the Devourer still spun, a field of metallic confetti glinting faintly in the distance. It was a sobering reminder of the destructive power they had unleashed, and the precariousness of their own existence. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity. Gus drifted in and out of consciousness. Clara remained still, her mind replaying the events of the past few hours. The impossible gamble, the surge of power, the agonizing strain on Sparky, and the final, glorious moment of destruction. Suddenly, a blip appeared on the damaged radar screen. Faint, but unmistakable. Clara, Gus mumbled, his eyes fluttering open. Something, on radar. Clara sat up, her weariness momentarily forgotten. She peered at the screen. Could be Zargonian, salvage crew. Too fast, Gus said, shaking his head. Definitely fleet signature. Hope surged through Clara. The cavalry's arrived. She reached for the comms unit, her fingers trembling. This is Captain Clara Stellaris of Sparky. We are requesting immediate assistance. Our coordinates are. She rattled off their location. A clear, authoritative voice crackled back. Captain Stellaris, this is Commander Zara Valkyrie of the Galactic Fleet flagship Indomitable. We have you on visual. Stand by for immediate extraction. Relief washed over Clara, so potent it almost brought her to her knees. Thank you, Commander. We are extremely grateful. Outside, the void was pierced by the brilliance of approaching ships. The Indomitable, a sleek, imposing vessel, dwarfed Sparky. Escort fighters zipped around it, their weapons charged. A tractor beam locked onto the battered tugboat, gently pulling it towards the flagship. Gus let out a whoop of joy. We're saved. We're actually saved. Clara managed a weak smile. Indeed, Gus. We are. As Sparky was drawn into the Indomitable's hangar bay, Clara looked around the ravaged control deck, a wave of affection washing over her. Goodbye, old girl, she whispered. You were a worthy steed. Inside the Indomitable, they were met by a team of medics and engineers. Commander Valkyrie, a tall, imposing woman with a stern expression, approached them. Captain Stellaris, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. I am Commander Valkyrie. Welcome aboard. You and your crew are safe now. Clara nodded, her legs feeling strangely unsteady. Thank you, Commander. We appreciate it. Valkyrie's gaze swept over them, taking in their disheveled appearance and the soot-stained remains of their uniforms. You have done Bloom City a great service, Captain. What you accomplished, it was nothing short of extraordinary. We just did what we had to do, Clara said, shrugging. Sparky had a few tricks up her sleeve. Valkyrie's lips twitched in a faint smile. So it seems. Now, let's get you both to the med bay. You've earned a bit of rest. As the medics led them away, Clara glanced back at the hangar bay, where Sparky was being examined by a team of engineers. She knew the old tugboat was beyond repair, but a part of her hoped they would find a way to salvage something, to preserve a piece of the ship that had dared to defy the odds. Later, after a thorough medical examination and a much-needed shower, Clara and Gus found themselves in the Indomitable's mess hall. The contrast between the sterile, high-tech environment of the flagship and the grimy confines of Sparky was jarring. "I still can't believe it," Gus said, shoveling food into his mouth. "Real food. Not that nutrient paste we were surviving on." Clara smiled, picking at her own meal. "Enjoy it, Gus. We've earned it." As they ate, they overheard conversations from other crew members. Whispers about the black hole, about the destruction of the Devourer, about the crazy captain who had pulled off the impossible. "They're calling us heroes," Gus said, his voice filled with disbelief. Clara shrugged. "Maybe we are. Or maybe we're just lucky. Or maybe, just maybe, the Zargonians underestimated a rusty tugboat." The sounds of celebration swelled around them. For the first time since embarking on their desperate mission, Clara felt a sense of peace. They had won a battle against overwhelming odds. But she knew that the war was far from over. The Zargonian Supreme Commander would not take this defeat lightly. But for now, they were safe. They were heroes of Bloom City. And they had bought their people a little more time. A small victory, perhaps, but a victory nonetheless. And in the face of overwhelming darkness, even the smallest spark of hope could make all the difference. A legend is born. The ovation was a physical force. Clara, perched on the makeshift stage in Bloom City Square, felt the gritty residue from shattered Zargonian fortifications dance around her, lit by the descending sun. A jubilant uproar, a symphony of laughter, tears, and shouts, enveloped her. Banners proclaiming Bloom endures, and Sparky triumphs, snapped in the lively breeze. "They're going absolutely bananas, Captain!" Gus bellowed, his grin wide enough to reveal every tooth. He sported a Bloom City Fire Department t-shirt, several sizes too small, a gift from an overzealous admirer. Clara laughed, raising a hand in acknowledgement. The ghost of Sparky's vibration still thrummed in her bones. The sharp tang of ozone lingered in her nostrils, the dying shriek of the Dreadnought echoed in her mind. Was it real? Had a dilapidated tugboat, pieced together with ingenuity and sheer audacity, truly salvaged a metropolis? Commander Zara Valkyrie approached, her expression softened by a rare smile. "Captain Stellaris," she announced, her voice booming through the improvised sound system, "the people of Bloom and the Galactic Fleet bestow upon you the Star of Valor." She fastened the medal, a radiant cluster of precious alloys, to Clara's battle-scarred flight suit. The crowd exploded. A knot formed in Clara's throat. It wasn't about accolades, it was about Bloom. It was about demonstrating that even when hope seemed extinguished, cleverness and bravery could prevail. Later, aboard the Indomitable, reality settled in. Medics had mended their wounds, engineers were swarming over Sparky, and the inevitable debriefings had commenced. Clara sat in her regulation quarters, a compact space that now felt palatial after the tugboat's cramped interior. She gazed at the Star of Valor, stark against the white table. A knock. Gus stood there, unusually somber. "They're saying." "Sparky's scrap," he mumbled, scuffing the floor with his boot. "Unsalvageable." A sharp pang of loss pierced Clara. Sparky was more than just machinery, she was a symbol of their grit, a testament to their unlikely triumph. "Let's go see," she replied, rising. The hangar bay buzzed with activity. Technicians in blue coveralls swarmed over Sparky, their faces grim. The tugboat looked even worse up close. Armor plating was warped and blackened, critical systems were exposed, and entire sections were simply gone. Chief Engineer Anya Petrova, a formidable woman whose hands bore the permanent etchings of her trade, met them. "Captain Stellaris, Mr. Geargrind," she greeted them, her voice tinged with respect. "We've assessed the damage. Frankly, it's a miracle she's holding together. Can she be salvaged?" Clara asked, her voice strained. Petrova sighed. Technically, yes. But it would necessitate a complete overhaul, replacing virtually every component. It wouldn't be the same Sparky. Gus trailed a hand over a shredded section of hull. She took a hell of a beating, he murmured. Clara studied the ravaged tugboat, the combat scars etched into her metal hide. She pictured the Zargonian Dreadnought, the desperate wager they'd made, the lives they'd protected. Then rebuild her, she said, her voice ringing with resolve. Rebuild her better. Utilize the finest technology at your disposal. Transform her into an emblem. Petrova arched a brow. An emblem, Captain. Yes, Clara declared, her eyes alight with conviction. An emblem of hope. An emblem of ingenuity. An emblem that even the smallest among us can ignite change. The notion ignited a firestorm. Reports of Sparky's valorous sacrifice, and Clara's concept for her rebirth, resonated throughout the galactic fleet and beyond. Contributions flooded in from every corner of the galaxy. Engineers volunteered their expertise. Corporations offered cutting-edge technology. Within weeks, the unthinkable was unfolding. Inside a dedicated hangar bay on the Indomitable, Sparky was being resurrected. Her aged, corroded hull was supplanted with a streamlined, reinforced alloy. Her obsolete engines were exchanged for state-of-the-art plasma drives. Her navigation systems were augmented with the latest quantum entanglement technology. Yet, it wasn't solely about advancements. Clara insisted Sparky retain her distinct essence. The dents and scrapes that chronicled her story were meticulously preserved. The mismatched paint, a tribute to Gus's improvisational talent, was painstakingly recreated. Gus himself was vital to the reconstruction. He collaborated with the engineers, guaranteeing Sparky retained her unique spirit. He even salvaged the cherished wrench he'd used to finalize the adjustments before their fateful encounter with the Dreadnought. Commander Valkyrie, initially dubious of Clara's vision, evolved into a steadfast champion. She witnessed the impact Sparky's narrative was having on morale, on the collective drive of the fleet. It was a reminder that the struggle against the Zargons wasn't solely about firepower and tactics, it was about faith, about embracing the impossible. Finally, the day dawned for Sparky's relaunch. A multitude gathered in the hangar bay, fleet officers, engineers, and Bloom City inhabitants who had been evacuated to the Indomitable. Clara stood on the platform, her pulse quickening. She gazed at Sparky gleaming beneath the hangar lights, a phoenix soaring from the ashes. She was no longer just a rusty tugboat, she was something greater. She was becoming a legend. Today, Clara began, her voice reverberating through the hangar, we honor not merely a machine, but an ideal. The ideal that even the most diminutive, the most dated, the most underestimated among us can achieve greatness. Sparky has demonstrated that ingenuity can conquer brute force, that valor can eclipse fear, and that hope can flourish even in the bleakest circumstances. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembly. Sparky transcends being a mere tugboat. She embodies our resilience, our resolve, our unwavering faith in a brighter future. With a dramatic gesture, she activated the power switch. The new plasma engines purred to life, suffusing the hangar with a gentle blue luminescence. Sparky glided effortlessly in the air, a testament to the power of human innovation and the enduring spirit of optimism. The crowd roared its approval. Clara beamed, her heart swelling. Sparky was prepared. Prepared to inspire. Prepared to defend. Prepared to continue her legend. The report of Sparky's revival spread to every reach of the galaxy, relayed on the quantum entanglement network. She was a beacon of light in a war-ravaged cosmos, a reminder that even against insurmountable odds, triumph was achievable. On far-flung planets, children played with Sparky replicas, dreaming of attaining heroism. In bustling spaceports, road-weary travelers exchanged tales of her daring feats. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, rebel groups whispered her name, discovering fortitude in her improbable victory. Sparky had become more than just a tugboat. She was a symbol of defiance, a testament to the power of the underdog, a legend forged from the ruins of destruction. And her story was just beginning.